friends, I'm so excited to finish up our series, Doubt It. So far in this series, we have learned that you're not alone in your questions, God doesn't shame our questions, and our questions don't always get answered. And with that, I've got a little story for you guys. Have any of you ever been to a haunted corn maze? Drop an emoji or a comment if you have. Because there was a time when I was maybe about 7 or 8 and I went to a haunted corn maze with my family. It was my dad, mom, sister, and me, and at least 1 or 2 of my cousins. It was super dark out, and needless to say, we had no idea where we were going or where we might end up, other than hopefully the exit. Sometimes we would turn the corner and it would seem like we were 1 step closer to making our way out, and other times it would be a crazy dude with a chainsaw chasing us in what was probably the wrong direction. For most of the maze, I was huddled behind my dad, terrified of what could be lurking around the corner. At one point during the haunted maze, this guy jumped out at us, and we were so scared we ended up jumping onto my mom, who, mind you, is only 5'1". So with the force of about 4 kids maiming her, we all ended up tumbling into the corn. After picking ourselves back up, we realized that during the craziness, my mom had also lost her glasses, which she very much needs to see. They pretty much shut down that area of the maze, and the employees got some flashlights, because during this time we didn't have cell phones we could bust out and use, so we could try and look for them. At this point, there seemed to be no hope in finding them. I mean, it was pretty much pitch black without the flashlights, and we pretty much all doubted that we would be able to find them. But hey, at least we tried. One of the employees even took down my mom's name and address, saying if they found them, they could mail them back to her. Yeah, right, like that would happen, right? Isn't that what life can be like sometimes, though? Sometimes the signs are clear about where to go next and you feel like you're on the right path. Then other times, we're unsure of where God might be leading us. It's like we're stuck in a haunted corn maze with no map, and sin is lurking around the corner just waiting to trap us. Our doubts and questions can leave us feeling lost and confused, wishing we had a map to point us in the right direction. For the last few weeks, we've been talking about what to do when we have doubts and questions about God. And this week, we're going to wrap up our conversation by talking about what to do when we're questioning what God wants us to do. And now, can anyone see into the future? Would anyone like to? If you could and would want to know the answers to any of these questions, drop a comment below and let us know. Would you like to know exactly what the future looks like for you? Would you like to know what job you're going to have? How about where you'll be working in 10 years? Now, I know some of you would maybe like to know who you might be marrying later on down the road, or maybe even how many children you have, or choose to not have. Or how about how many of you would like to know where you're going to live in the future? Or even better, when are you going to retire, and maybe even where are you going to retire? Because we all have hopes and goals for each of those questions, but none of us know for sure. And unless you believe you've somehow seen into the future, the direction of your life is largely unknown. And that can be scary. What if you make the wrong decision? How do you figure out where God might be leading you? Sometimes life feels like a series of decisions that all seem dangerous and scary, just like how a haunted corn maze can feel. Today we're going to look at a remarkable woman who has had questions about where God was leading her and what she did about it. Now, before the story of Esther begins, here's what you need to know. There's a powerful king of Persia named Xerxes. Xerxes did not follow God, but there were many Jewish people in his kingdom who did. And one day, Xerxes got very drunk and angry at his wife, Queen Vashti, because she refused to parade herself in front of a bunch of rulers Xerxes wanted to impress with her beauty. He then threw Vashti out of the palace. Now, as time passes, Xerxes realizes the consequences of his actions and misses his queen. The deed, however, is done. Seeing that their ruler regretted the action that they suggested, the ministers proposed that he found a new wife, or a new queen, via an elaborate beauty contest of all the kingdom's beautiful maidens. Now in Susa lived a beautiful Jew named Esther. She is an orphan who was raised by her uncle Mordecai. And when they come to take her to the palace, Mordecai insightfully instructs her not to reveal that she is a Jew or who her family really is. Now, needless to say, after a year-long process, Esther is deemed the fairest of them all and named the queen. Now, could you imagine the doubts and questions Esther might have had? In no time at all, she was stripped of her family, her home, and pretty much everything else that she has ever known to go essentially try out to be the next queen. And unfortunately for a lot of us, we could be feeling a little like this right now. We have been unable to attend school, see our friends, go to the movies, and essentially do anything that we are usually able to do. Now, I imagine some of us are currently wrestling with some doubts about why God doesn't seem to be showing up in our lives right now. So let's take our first discussion break and drop your thoughts and comments to our upcoming questions in the chat. Thank you for sharing your thoughts and questions with us. We love being here to help sort through some of these doubts with you. Now let's continue to summarize Esther 3 and see what is going down in Xerxes' kingdom. In the meantime, Xerxes appoints Haman as the most powerful official in the empire and issues a decree that all should bow down to him. Mordecai refuses to bow down before Haman, and his refusal infuriates him. Driven by his family's historic hatred of the Jewish people, Haman goes to King Xerxes and asks for permission to destroy the Jews. The king agrees and issues a law to all 127 provinces that the Jews in all of them are going to be exterminated and their property kept as plunder. Wow, can you imagine waking up one morning only to find out that your entire race, your entire family is about to be killed? That would be absolutely terrifying. I know I'd be packing up my stuff, trying to get as far away as possible so maybe my family could be spared. Unfortunately, with only donkeys and maybe some camels to travel on, they wouldn't get far fast. Let's now take another discussion break, and remember, we love hearing about your thoughts in the chat. seems crazy that all this is happening to Esther and her people in what seems like not a lot of time. She's probably going crazy wondering how she could possibly help her people when they're all doomed to be killed. And here it is that we pick up the story in Esther 4:10 through 17 and how she wrestles with the choice she has to make. Mordecai has told Esther that she needs to go see the king. And this is what we're told happens next. Then Esther told Hatach to go back and relay this message to Mordecai. All the king's officials and even the people in the provinces know that anyone who appears before the king in his inner court without being invited is doomed to die unless the king holds out his gold scepter. And the king has not called for me to come to him for 30 days. So Hatach gave Esther's message to Mordecai. Mordecai sent this reply back to Esther. Don't think for a moment that because you're in the palace, you will escape when all the other Jews are killed. If you keep quiet at a time like this, deliverance and relief for the Jews will arise from some other place, but you and your relatives will die. Who knows if perhaps you were made queen for just such a time as this. Then Esther sent this reply to Mordecai. Go and gather together all the Jews of Susa and fast for me. Do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. My maids and I will do the same. And then, though it is against the law, I will go in to see the king. If I must die, I must die. So Mordecai went away and did everything as Esther had ordered him. So that's crazy. So after all of those messages back and forth, Mordecai pretty much lays it down like this. If you don't help us, then help will come from somewhere else. However, and this is one of my favorite verses of all time, perhaps you were made queen for such a time as this. See, Esther had a choice. She had to overcome herself in order to do what God created and positioned her to do. She was risking death to go and talk to the king, and I can only imagine how scary that would have been for her. So let's come together again for another set of discussion questions to dig even deeper into how this can also come through in our lives today. seem like God forces the issue of time. He puts an idea or a situation into your path, then before you know it, everything's moving so fast and you're not sure what's going on other than God's working in and through you, and it's excitingly, if not also nervously awesome. Other times, he seems to entrust it to us. He gives the responsibility to us, waiting for a shift in our hearts, signaling that we're ready to move out of our fears and doubts and into the faith of God. But if you've ever read the story of Esther, an interesting thing is, God's never mentioned, not once in the whole book. But that doesn't mean God was absent from the situation, even if God's name was absent from the book. I'm guessing Esther probably went to God in prayer when she was deciding what to do. But one thing we do know is that she did seek the advice of a godly person, her uncle Mordecai. When we're experiencing confusion, uncertainty, or fear, it's easy to question what we're supposed to do next and why God isn't making our path clear. Scripture never promises that God will directly tell us what comes next, but the story of Esther shows us that we do need godly people to help us gain clarity, because godly people can help us with our questions. Just like how in that haunted corn maze, I sought comfort and safety in the one person I knew I could trust, my dad. I knew that of all the people I went with in that maze, he was the biggest and strongest person, and I trusted him the most. And aside from my mom getting knocked around a bit, we did get out. He got us out to safety. And also, for any of you maybe wondering, my mom did in fact get her glasses back. It was about a month after visiting the haunted maze when they were cutting down the corn, and they had managed to find them and did in fact mail them back. So we doubted for nothing. And so as we've talked about before, how important friendships are in our lives, that's not the only kind of support system we need. We do need a network of godly people of all ages to help us make wise decisions when we're not sure what to do. There used to be a famous game show called Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? When contestants got stuck on a trivia questions, they could phone a friend to ask one person they trusted for advice. But those contestants probably had a few different categories of people on their phone a friend list, like the history buff, the pop culture expert, or the sports fan. So let's take a moment and think about the different categories of people we might want as our phone of friends. For the first one, we have our cheerleader. Who do you go to when you need a dose of encouragement and positivity? Who can you always trust to give you a pep talk? Or how about a counselor who always gives you great advice? When you're in a dilemma, have questions, or don't know how to move forward, who do you trust to help you take the next step? Or maybe it's a coach who can always motivate you to keep making progress on your goals. Who's your mentor? That older person who has an ongoing relationship with you, who just wants to make you better, and who you trust enough to share the details of your life. Or how about a pastor? And maybe this person has the official title of a pastor, or maybe they don't. But who is guiding you and advising you in your faith and helping you develop a deeper relationship with God? Or a confidant. Who would you trust with your deepest secrets? This should be someone who is safe, trusted, and wise. Or a prayer support. This could be one person or a group of people who you can always trust to pray for you. I am so excited to move into our last discussion time to further encourage those amazing godly people in your lives. And remember, they should cover a range of ages and wisdoms. We can learn so much from those farther along in our journeys, as well as those who are newer in their faith. But surrounding ourselves with those godly people is one of the most important things we can do. Now, these people won't guarantee we'll always make right decisions when we're uncertain where God is leading us, but they'll at least make good decisions easier to make. Now, we've covered a lot of things in this series, like how having doubts and questions is normal because you're not alone in your questions. That God doesn't shame us for our questions, but gives us the evidence we need in order to believe, especially when life gets painful or disappointing things happen. Our questions don't always get answered, but God is still with us in the midst of it. And when we're questioning or doubting where God is leading us, God knows godly people can help us with our questions and gives us a support system to help us. Now, as we close out this series, I hope the main things you take away from this series are that you don't have to be afraid of your questions or doubts, because God can handle them. And that if you feel safe enough to voice your questions and doubts here, or at least with one other person you trust. When you have a question or a doubt you need to process, I hope you know that we love you and we're always here for you.